Hello class, this is Mr. Beller, and this segment of these videos on absolutism will focus on the 30 Years' War, and we'll focus on the rise of absolutism in Russia. With the 30 Years' War, I'm only going to look, or with Central Europe, I'm only going to look at what caused the 30 Years' War and some of the consequences of the 30 Years' War and the changes, the important changes that the Peace of Westphalia brought. The other notes on Central Europe, you can go ahead and omit. With Russia, I am going to discuss how Russian monarchs or the Russian czars strengthened the Russian state, and what steps did Peter the Great take to westernize Russia and to emerge as the absolute ruler of Russia. So the 30 Years' War, if you remember in my video on France, the 30 Years' War took place in 1618 and lasted through 1648. So what was the cause of the 30 Years' War? Two causes. Number one, religion. After the Peace of Augsburg in 1555, Germany or German states, they were allowed to pick whether or not they want to be Lutheran or Catholic. This Peace of Augsburg stopped fighting momentarily, but it did not end any suspicions that Protestants and Catholics had towards each other. And you saw these suspicions result in Protestants forming the Protestant Union in 1608, and Catholic princes forming the Catholic League in 1609. And so you have alliances now that have formed between Protestants and Catholics, and all they need now is a spark, a reason to go to war with each other. This reason this opportunity will come about in 1618, in which the future Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand II will start to take some steps that will close Protestant churches, and he will use the military, the army, to put down any sort of Protestant rebellions. And so now all of a sudden you have these German princes seizing this opportunity to challenge the power and the authority of the Holy Roman Emperor. And so you see the 30 Years' War break out in 1618. This 30 Years' War will last for, you've guessed it, 30 years, and this will involve, countries outside of Germany. The Habsburgs, or the Catholic royalty in Spain, will get involved on the side of the Holy Roman Emperor. France will get involved, on the side of the Protestants, because they see this as an attempt to weaken one of their biggest rivals in Spain. And so when the war ends in 1648, you have a couple consequences here. Number one, Germany is weakened as a result of this war. The German population falls from about 20 to 16 million. The war takes a tremendous impact on German agriculture. You can't farm when there's battles raging on, so the economy is disrupted. Trade is disrupted during this time, so that has a negative impact on the German economy. And in fact, you will not see Germany reunited, until the 1800s with the emergence of Otto von Bismarck. So it will take them a long time to rebound from this 30 Years' War. In 1648, you see the Peace of Westphalia signed, in which there's a couple of terms here that are important for us to jot down. Number one, or some of the results of the Peace of Westphalia. Hold on. This is the one part I do not have memorized. I apologize. So number one, some of the consequences of the Peace of Westphalia. It weakens the Habsburg family. So it weakens the Catholic ruling family in both Spain and in Central Europe. Number two, the Peace of Westphalia strengthens France. It gives them some German territory. Number three, German princes are now independent of the Holy Roman Empire. You no longer have a Catholic empire in Central Europe. Instead, you have small independent states in Europe. The fourth one, it ended religious wars in Europe. This has been going on for over 100 years, and so now with the Peace of Westphalia. Religious wars have come to an end. And you have a new method of peace in which all sides come together, in which they negotiate a peace to hopefully solve the problems that caused this war to break out in the first place. And then the last and most important result of the Peace of Westphalia is with the decimation of the Catholic Empire. You have the modern state system established, in which you now have small independent countries. Look to other videos in which I discuss the rise of absolutism in Russia and England. Hello class, this is the one of the many installments of my absolutism notes. In this installment I will talk about the rise of absolutism in Russia. And the first thing we need to do is we have to be able to know the historical context surrounding the the rise of Peter the Great and absolutism in Russia. And it starts with Ivan the Fourth in 1533. Ivan the Fourth in 1533 comes to become king of Russia at the tender age of 3. And so during the first part of his quote-unquote rule, you had the landowners of Russia, or essentially the nobility in Russia, known as the boyars, and they are competing with each other to put policies into place that will benefit them. At the age of 16, Ivan the Fourth will take power for himself, and he will crown himself Tsar, C-Z-A-R. You might also see this spelled T-S-A-R. The title Tsar is, it means Caesar, which is going back to Augustus Caesar of the Roman Empire. But when you see the word Tsar, it just means Russian monarch or Russian king. So Ivan IV is now Tsar of Russia, and for the first part of his reign as king, or his reign as Tsar, this is known as a good period. He increases Russian territory, and he gives Russia a code of laws. Remember a code of laws like Hammurabi's Code, or the Justinian Code, or anytime you codify laws like the 12 Tables of Rome, you give your country a uniform and written down set of laws in which everyone has to follow. And so Ivan IV gives them that. The latter part of his reign as king is a reign of terror, and this is where Ivan IV will get the nickname Ivan the Terrible. In 1566, his wife Anastasia dies, and Ivan believes that she was poisoned, and he targets the boyars, or the Russian landowners, as the people who have poisoned his wife. And so Ivan will spend the last part of his reign as Tsar organizing a secret or a personal police force, in which the members of the police will be dressed in all black. They ride black horses, and they hunt down and murder anyone that Ivan anyone that Ivan IV labels as a traitor to the Russian state. The ultimate downfall comes in 1581, when Ivan IV gets in an argument with his oldest son. This argument turns violent, and he ends up killing his son, who was going to be the heir to the Russian throne. And so now when Ivan dies 3 years later, he leaves the throne to his second son, who is physically and mentally inept and cannot rule. And so you see Russia from 1584 to 1616, it's a darker period for Russian politics. In 1616, the Russian nobility decides to give the crown, or give the position of the Tsar to the grandnephew of Anastasia. And so thus begins the Romanov dynasty. The Romanovs were a powerful and ruling family in Russia, and they will be in charge of the Russian government all the way through World War One, when the Bolsheviks assassinate the last of the Romanovs and establish a communist government in in Russia. And so in 1616, you see the beginning of the Romanov family. And this is going to pave the way for Peter the Great to come to power in 1696 and establish an absolute monarch in Russia. Peter the Great, when he comes to power in 1696, he has hopes to westernize the Russian people and Russian society as a whole. And in fact, in 1697, he embarks on a grand embassy in which him and a group of people would travel to Western Europe and observe, political institutions, military strategy, and Western culture in general. And Peter the Great will come back and he wants to westernize Russia, using Western Europe as a model to change the Russian people. He comes in, he has some problems here that he has to face. Number one, the Russian people don't believe that change is necessary. In fact, Peter the Great has a quote when he talks to one of his government officials, in which he says, essentially he says, for you know as well as I do, that, even if something is good and necessary, the Russian people would not change unless they are forced to. And so that's what Peter the Great does. He forces the Russian people to change and to accept this westernization process that he's going to put into place. The second problem is that the Russian Orthodox Church is too strong. And so Peter the Great will abolish or remove the head of the church, and he is going to put into place a group of people that, follows his direction and his policies. And this one would be known as the Holy Synod, Synod. The third problem that he encounters is the Russian nobility or the Russian landowning class is too powerful. And so what he does is he recruits from lower ranking families and he promotes them to positions of authority and he gives them grants of land. And so now you have this new and emergent landowning class that are now loyal and dependent on Peter for their success. And so he removes or he diminishes the power of the old landowning class or the boyars, and he replaces them with this new landowning class that sees Peter as responsible for their success. The army is outdated, the army is ill-trained, and so what he does is Peter will hire European officials to drill, to train the Russian army with European tactics and strategies and European weapons. Some other steps he takes in westernizing Russia, he introduces the potato, which will become a staple of the Russian diet. He starts Russia's first newspaper. He raised women's status in society. He encourages them to attend public meetings and forums, and so they start to have more of a say in Russian policy and Russian society as a whole. He orders nobles to dress in Western fashions, and he starts to open or establish schools to advance education in Russia. The last problem is that Peter the Great wants a window to Western Europe or a window to Europe, and he envisions a seaport in which Russia can now travel easily to Western Europe, and he does this by creating St. Petersburg. He creates St. Petersburg as a way to give the Russian people access to Western Europe. And even though the creation or the construction of St. Petersburg resulted in thousands of deaths of the Russian people, ultimately this venture proved to be successful, and Peter the Great was able to establish his seaport in Russia to give the Russian people and the Russian government a window to Europe. This will allow Russia to emerge as a formidable power in in European or in international affairs, through the 19th century. Look towards my last video in which I discuss absolutism in England.